What better day than the International Day for Human Rights to proclaim this and to remind the government that rights and citizenship are not negotiable. It's not going to be easy to get rid of Sharia courts, but often that which is fair and just is not easy to do. We have the successful campaign in Canada to fall back on. We also have, I believe, a majority in this country and across the world who support our campaign. Our campaign will aim to mobilize mass support and political action, raise public awareness, both among Muslim women of their rights in civil courts, but also the population at large about what Sharia law really means for women and children in particular and for the society in general. We aim to go across the country, talk to people in public meetings, via stalls in the streets, via workshops, use the internet, rallies and demonstrations, and also to take the courts and challenge them legally in order to achieve this. We won't stop until we get rid of Sharia courts as well as all religious-based tribunals. And we believe that this will be a benchmark for what it means to live in a civil society in the 21st century. Thank you. There's a lot of instances in which the state intervenes in the private behavior of people if it's harmful to other people. For example, in the issue of domestic violence or child abuse. And Sharia courts are harmful, even if they're being conducted in the so-called private realm of things. You speak about for example, if you have someone who believes in witchcraft and then holds sessions to exorcise the devil from a child or a woman, that's very clear for us because witchcraft doesn't have the respectability that religion does. But very often Sharia courts do very much, well, it would if it would be abusing of a child.
A child, yes,
yeah,
but not.
Yeah. And especially we have to start talking about this as well. If it's abusive to children, why shouldn't we consider it an abuse of women as well? There's this case in the newspapers right now about this family who've abused horses, for example, and they've been hauled to court. Where it's interesting how, it seems the standard of abusing animals is higher than the standard of abusing women, and particularly those who are deemed to be, Muslim women or of having other cultures or religions. This is one aspect of it. The other is the question of freedom of religion. I think the concept of having the right to a religion is very different to having the right to a religious court, for example. And what's interesting is that whose religion is it, in a sense? Because, we have examples of women who are being railroaded into going to these courts, whose rights are actually being violated. But it's then being, in a sense, deceptively portrayed as their right to religion. Gina mentioned the issue of divorce. Now, this is a very important issue because I debated Siddiqui, who heads the Muslim Arbitration Tribunal, today on 5 Live. And he said, well, how can you say it's anti-women because 95% of our caseload are women? Well, the reality is they're women because they have no other option. You force people to come to these courts and then you portray it as a choice and a right. How deceptive can you be? If you look at the issue of divorce, for example, men have the right to unilaterally divorce by just saying talaq 3 times at various occasions. A woman who wants a divorce without the consent of her husband must go to a Sharia council. End of story. And the only way the Sharia council will give her a divorce is after trying to, a slap, they've said it on their website. Is it just a slap? It's not really violence. You can live with it, If she consents, she has to give up her dowry, her maintenance. If it was given to her when she was married, she has to return that amount of money. If it was due her at a divorce or other time, she has to give up her maintenance in order to get that divorce. So she actually has to pay her husband to get a divorce. I'm sorry. So this is her right to religion? I don't think so. Look at the issue of child custody. This is, in this country, the welfare of a child is paramount. It's paramount. But under Sharia law, a boy of 7 must be given to his father. End of story. End of story. Why? He doesn't need the love of his mother anymore. So it's not a question of seeing what's best for the child, what's best for the situation at hand, dividing things equally in a divorce, for example, as would be the case in a secular court. And so I think we have to look very carefully at these cases. These are serious violations of human rights, and we will not tolerate them. I'm sorry, we won't tolerate them in Iran, and we're not going to tolerate them in Britain. Another issue is that Keith raised, the case of M. The House of Lords decided that this woman from Lebanon, who was going to be deported back to Lebanon by immigration, should not be deported because her child was 12 years old, and that according to Sharia law in Lebanon, her child would be handed over to the father, to an abusive father. And the House of Lords said she can't be returned to Lebanon because it is her human right to stay with her child. Well, what about women living in this country? Don't they have the same rights as a woman who lives in Lebanon, according to the House of Lords? And effectively what's happening is, it seems that they don't, that the Sharia councils can do exactly this and get away with it, and have been getting away with it. One final thing, there are a lot of issues to discuss, but David Pollock's comment about how this is part of a larger issue, I agree 100%. I think it's wrong if you take their line that, Siddiqui said today in the no, actually, Aina Khan, I debated on Women's Hour, a Muslim lawyer who's defending Islamic law. She said, well, there's a rise in Sharia courts because women are demanding it. Nonsense. There's a rise in Sharia courts because there is a rise of a political Islamic movement, and they're very linked. And you see that with, restrictions on freedom of expression to restrictions on women's rights in Britain. And so we do have to look at it from a human rights perspective, understand what these courts really mean, and they are a clear denial of women's rights, of children's rights, of human rights, and they cannot be tolerated in Britain. I'm sorry.